In each gentle tale, we'll tread softly through the dust-choked plains of ancient Anatolia. Lean close to hear the iron wheels carve rhythm into battle, and whisper together the secrets that changed how empires clashed forever. If these explorations into forgotten innovations and the human courage behind them resonate with you, please subscribe so you never miss our next descent into the past's quieter wonders. Now, curl under your blankets, let the world outside fade, and drift with me to a time when wood met bronze, horses thundered like distant storms, and a single invention reshaped the art of war for millennia to come. The sun had barely crested the rugged hills of central Anatolia when the first Hittite chariot prototype rattled out of a clay smoke workshop. Here, amid the scent of freshly hewn ashwood and molten bronze, a handful of ambitious wheelwrights and smiths gathered under the watchful eye of Prince Tudalir. He believed that a vehicle faster than any foot soldier could reshape battlefields and, perhaps, the fate of his burgeoning empire. Wooden spokes, fashioned from resilient plane trees, were wedged into a circular hub reinforced with a bronze band. Bronze fittings, once destined for ceremonial goblets, were repurposed into yokes and axle guards. Leatherworkers stitched harnesses from tanned oxhide, confident these straps would withstand the thunderous weight of 2 charging horses. As the prototype rolled over uneven stone floors, the assembled artisans exchanged hopeful glances. A wheeled war machine had shifted from a clay model to a rumbling reality. Outside, a small team of svelte Anatolian horses, their manes braided with crimson wool, pawed at the dirt in anticipation. Prince Tudalir, draped in a simple linen tunic streaked with ash from the forge, climbed aboard. With a gentle tug, the draft horses surged forward, and the chariot lurched into motion, clattering, swaying, surprising everyone with its surprising nimbleness. In that moment, the Hittite chariot was no longer an experiment. It was the dawn of a revolution that would echo through centuries of warfare. In the dim light of early morning, the Hittite workshop hummed with activity as artisans gathered around a frame of freshly hewn ash. Here lay the skeleton of the war chariot. 2 parallel beams joined by crossbars, destined to carry riders into the fray. Master wheelwright Aramili guided his apprentices through each precision step. First, the wheels. 10 sturdy spokes radiating from a bronze-reinforced hub were crafted for maximum spring and minimal weight. Each spoke was carved to a slight curve, absorbing shock as the chariot thundered over rocky terrain. Next came the axle, a single bronze-capped beam engineered to spin freely within leather-lined bearings. The leather, treated in sheep's urine and scented with juniper, ensured the axle would not seize even under dust-laden strain. Above, the yoke, a bronze arc padded with woven reeds, would cradle the horse's harness, distributing force evenly across their shoulders. 2 sideboards, low enough to allow archers to fire unhindered, were fastened with bronze nails, each stamped with the workshop's mark. As metal met wood, the very air seemed to shimmer. Kiripani, the veteran bronzesmith, polished fittings until they gleamed like morning dew. Koila ma, koila ya. He murmured a prayer to Sharuma, god of the mountains, asking for strength in upcoming battles. When the final bracket clicked into place, the chariot stood complete, a harmonious union of wood, bronze, and leather that promised both swiftness and resilience on the battlefield. Long before chariots thundered across battlefields, Hittite visionaries recognized that the war machine's true power lay in its steeds. On the sun-baked plains south of the Taurus Mountains, herdsmen guided lean, muscular horses, descendants of Syrian wild stock, toward early stables. These animals boasted endurance to outlast infantry marches, and nimble legs to sprint across broken terrain. Breeders selected for broad chests, strong hindquarters, and calm temperaments. Foals with flighty nerves were culled or sold to nomads who prized their ferocity. In makeshift paddocks, Mares and stallions were paired under the watchful eye of charioteers, a master equerry whose ears could discern a flaw in gait from 50 paces. He noted how a particular dun stallion, speckled like a storm cloud, pawed eagerly at its tether. This would become the prized lead horse for the first war chariot trials. Under charioteers' guidance, young recruits learned to saddle and bridle without spooking their mounts. A misstep could unseat the heaviest warrior at a gallop. On a crisp morning, the dun stallion and its bay companion were led to the new chariot prototype. Charioteers whispered to the beasts, running his hand along their bridles as if sharing a secret. When Prince Tudhalia gave the signal, the horses surged forward in unison, their hooves drumming a steady cadence. As they pulled the vehicle over sun-bleached stones, the Hittite dream of mobile warfare felt closer than ever. Before the Hittite chariots could thunder across battlefields, their crews had to master the delicate art of balance and speed. At dawn, the training grounds outside Hattusa came alive with the rhythmic of horses and the of wooden wheels. Recruits, youths of noble birth and common stock alike, faced a gauntlet of drills designed to forge muscle memory and unspoken trust between driver and archer. First came the balance runs, a single horse harnessed to a two-wheeled frame, its driver leaning low to counter every wobble. Apprentices practiced mounting and dismounting at full trot, learning to spring swiftly clear of tipping wheels. Next, they faced the bow drill, loosing arrows at stationary targets, while hurtling past at breakneck pace. The slightest miscalculation could send both crew and chariot sprawling across the dust. Under the stern gaze of Commander Pihunia, silver-haired and tall as a cedar, novices circled wooden markers, racing against both clock and their own racing hearts. Nearby, veteran charioteers coached them. "Feel the pulse beneath your hands," they urged. "Listen to your horse. Let it guide your breath." With each circuit, recruits shed hesitation and fear, replacing them with a steady calm. By dusk, ringed with sweat and dust-dark tunics, they'd grown from curious lads into confident drivers and deadly archers, ready to carry the Hittite thunder into the fray. Dawn's pale light revealed a low-lying marsh at the edge of Hittite territory, perfect ground for a test of speed and shock. The Mitanni border garrison, still groggy from their night watch, heard a distant thunder unlike any storm. As mist curled over the reeds, a squadron of Hittite chariots burst into view, wheels spraying mud and water, their bronze fittings gleaming like distant stars. Spearmen and archers scrambled to form defensive ranks, but the charioteers, 2 to each vehicle, had already gauged the boggy terrain. Driver-instructor Tarukapa guided his team through a sweeping flank, the chariot's broad wheels biting into the soft earth with surprising steadiness. Behind him, Archer Padopa let loose volleys of arrows that arced through the grey dawn, sowing confusion in the enemy lines. Spearmen tried to pivot their long thrusting poles, but the chariot's momentum carried them past each clumsy defence, leaving trembling soldiers in their wake. Within moments, the Mitanni retreated to higher ground, abandoning weapons and wagons in a hasty flight. When the dust settled, the Hittite commanders realized they had witnessed a new era of warfare, mobility and shock that foot soldiers could neither outrun nor withstand. Word of the chariot's battlefield baptism spread swiftly back to Katusha, igniting both awe and urgent plans to produce dozens more. On that misty morning, the Hittite chariot ceased to be an experiment. It became the empire's thunderbolt, ready to rewrite the rules of conflict. When the Hittite charioteers thundered onto the field, their foes often mistook the approaching assault for an earthquake. Speed was their greatest weapon, a slender line of ashwood wheels slicing the air, horses' hooves drumming like rolling thunder. Behind each chariot's bronze-clad rim, drivers executed fluid, flanking maneuvers, darting around rigid infantry formations. Scouts signaled with twisted bronze horns, their calls drifting over the clash of shields and spears. The Hittite high command studied the enemy's rhythm, then struck where the phalanx was weakest. often between heavy spearmen and lighter skirmishers. As the chariots veered in tight circles, archers let loose volleys of arrows, sowing confusion and shattering cohesion. Infantry that tried to stand ground found themselves outpaced. Those who fled collided into their own ranks. Even seasoned foes hesitated to countercharge, a machine that blended mobility and firepower so seamlessly. By twilight, many battles had been won before swords could meet metal. The tactics of thunder and flight became a hallmark of Hittite warfare, elevating the chariot from transport to the empire's most fearsome shock troop. Unlike foot archers, Hittite chariot archers combined steady aim with kinetic energy, releasing arrows at full gallop. Each two-man team required silent coordination. While the driver held rein and kept horses on a precise arc, the archer knocked and loosed barbed shafts with practiced ease. They climbed into position before dawn, sun just peeking over Mount Zerni, checking bowstrings and feathered arrows destined to tear through linen and flesh alike. Mounted atop a swaying platform, the archer's core muscles engaged constantly, adjusting for every bump and turn. They learned to fire low to pierce shields, then to raise their bow for chaining volleys over enemy defenses. Whispered commands passed between them. A tap on the driver's shoulder signified, "Prepare to wheel," while a gentle heel cue meant, "Hold position." Their presence unnerved infantry. One precise shot could drop an officer, fracturing morale. By mastering this aerial volley, Hittite armies gained a psychological as well as tactical edge, turning the warrior archer into a mobile, near-invisible threat, an arrow storm at the heart of enemy ranks. A chariot's speed offered little defense without reinforcement. To shield crew and machine, Hittite armorers developed overlapping bronze scales for both men and wheel hubs, balancing weight and flexibility. Leatherworkers stitched thick oxhide quilts lined with wool beneath breastplates to cushion arrow strikes. Even the chariot body bore defensive plates, bronze sheets embossed with storm god motifs that could deflect javelins. On the field, the sun glinted off bronze yokes and rim bands. Enemy archers often hesitated when the first volley pinged harmlessly away, yet too much armor risked slowing the horses. Thus, every fitting was tested, on Anatolian hills, gauging how much bronze a team could bear without sacrificing speed. In training camps, smiths hammered new alloy blends, adding tin for hardness or copper for ductility to perfect the balance. These protective measures transformed fragile experimental carts into resilient war machines. The chariot was no longer merely fast. It was also formidable, shrugging off the initial hail of spears to smash through lines in perfect formation. Behind every chariot charge lay an intricate web of logistics. Grain and fodder columns trailed the chariot core, ensuring horses remained strong. Caravans of pack mules carried spare axle pins and bronze ingots for emergency repairs. Quartermasters tallied harness leather, bowstrings, and arrowheads by the thousand. At dawn, blacksmith tents sprung to life. Bellows breathed fire under anvil, while wheelwrights straightened bent spokes. Doctors tended sprained horse legs and charioteers bruised ribs. Supply officers sent daily dispatches back to Hattusa, reporting consumption rates and projected needs. A single broken wheel could stall an entire brigade, so mobile workshops were mounted on ox-drawn wagons, equipped with lathes and smelting hearths. By mastering supply chains, the Hittites turned fast, cutting-edge warfare into a sustainable force. Without these invisible efforts, the thunder of chariots would have echoed but once before silence claimed the remains. The baptism of chariot warfare came at the Battle of the Ahiawa frontier, where Hittite chariots first faced massed infantry phalanxes. Traditional commanders braced for shield walls. Instead, they witnessed bronze wheels slicing through rows of spearmen. Horses pivoted like living blades, and archers rained arrows from above. Witnesses later described enemy lines crumpling as if struck by a thunderbolt. Weeks later, at the skirmish of Mount Gabar, chariots chased retreating Mitanni scouts across rocky slopes, turning escape into rout. The drivers navigated narrow passes with uncanny precision, while archers finished off isolated stragglers. Word of these victories spread rapidly. Envoys carried tales of arms of thunder that rendered conventional tactics obsolete. These early triumphs cemented the Hittite Chariot's reputation. Rival kings hastened to negotiate peace or adopt similar machines. Back in Hattusa, war songs were composed, lauding the chariot's might and its rider's valor. In a world where strength once lay solely in men's arms, speed and innovation claimed the crowd. Aleppo's mud brick walls rose like ancient sentinels against the horizon, sheltering a city famed for its wealth. When Prince Tudhaliya's forces approached, chariots formed the vanguard of a blockade meant to cut off the city's supply lines. By day, charioteers roamed the plains beyond the walls, intercepting merchant caravans. By night, they circled the city under torchlight to unnerve defenders. The distant roll of wheels became Aleppo's heartbeat, a constant reminder of the Hittite presence. Inside the city, sentries peered through crenellations as bronze-clad chariots performed silent patrols. Whenever ladders or siege engines threatened, the Hittites unleashed short, lightning raids. 2 or 3 chariots charging at full gallop to smash stockpiles of firewood or topple wooden barricades. These swift blows, though minor tactically, weighed heavily on morale. After weeks of attrition, Aleppo's rulers sued for peace. They delivered tribute, grain sacks, fine textiles, and captured horses in exchange for the lifting of the siege. For the Hittites, the operation showcased the chariot's strategic versatility. Not only a shock weapon in open battle, but an instrument of psychological warfare and logistics denial. The fall of Aleppo marked a milestone in the empire's ascent and cemented chariots as indispensable tools of both war and diplomacy. Diplomatic missions to neighboring kingdoms were no longer simple delegations of envoys. They were displays of armored power on wheels. Prince Tudhaliya dispatched chariot-led processions to courts in Mitanni and Babylon. As Hittite envoys entered foreign capitals, the rhythmic beat of hooves on paved roads announced their arrival long before they glimpsed the bronze fittings glinting in the sun. Local dignitaries, expecting humble emissaries, found themselves confronted by a dozen polished chariots, each crewed by stern-faced warriors. In sealed audience chambers, treaties were read aloud while charioteers stood at attention behind the envoys, their presence a silent guarantee of Hittite resolve. When negotiations stalled, the procession would retreat to an open courtyard, where chariot crews performed precision drills, wheel-to-wheel turns, coordinated volleys of arrows at stationary targets, and mock charges. Spectators gasped at the spectacle, proof that refusing Hittite demands might invite thunderous retaliation. These demonstrations were brilliantly calibrated exercises in soft coercion. They conveyed technological sophistication and discipline without bloodshed. Diplomatic envoys returned home carrying not only new treaties, but also Hittite manuals on chariot construction, leaving rival powers scrambling to catch up. Thus, the chariot became both sword and pen, writing Hittite influence into the annals of Near Eastern politics. Chariot technology did not remain uniquely Hittite for long. Through diplomatic marriages and interwoven trade routes, key innovations traveled south to Egypt and west to Mycenae. Hittite craftsmen were sometimes invited or coerced into foreign workshops to share their secrets. In return, they encountered exotic dyes, new timber species, and metallurgical techniques that would refine their own designs. At an Aegean port, Mycenaean shipwrights marveled at Hittite yoke assemblies, sketching them onto clay tablets. Egyptian scribes later annotated these diagrams with hieroglyphs, documenting axle lubrication recipes using date palm oils. Each scribal notation, reed-drawn with meticulous care, contained a piece of cross-cultural dialogue, proof that wheels did more than roll, they carried ideas. This exchange reshaped Mediterranean warfare. Mycenaean chariots incorporated lighter frames and decorative inlays learned from the Hittites. Egyptian vehicles gained sturdier wheel rims, suited for desert sands. Meanwhile, back in Anatolia, returning artisans experimented with these foreign innovations, embedding coloured glass into chariot panels and adopting new bow constructions. What began as a military revolution evolved into a broader technological renaissance, knitting distant courts together through shared craftsmanship and mutual admiration. Rival powers quickly devised countermeasures to blunt the chariot's impact. In Syria, infantry drilled to plant sharpened stakes along likely chariot routes, creating lethal hedgerows. In the Zagros foothills, warriors excavated shallow trenches disguised by brush to arrest the chariot's momentum. These adaptations forced Hittite engineers back to the drawing board. Stronger axles to survive stake punctures, wider wheels to bridge trenches. The innovations didn't stop with defense. Mitanni tacticians reorganized their foot soldiers into mobile spear walls, sections that could close ranks in seconds when a chariot charge loomed. They trained missile troops to focus fire on the horses rather than the chariot crews, recognizing that disabling beasts neutralized the threat. In turn, Hittite archers shifted to firing weighted arrows, designed to pierce leather harnesses, protecting their mounts. By the mid-14th century BCE, the chariot race had become a sophisticated arms competition. Every new countermeasure sparked an inventive response, fostering a cycle of military creativity. While the initial shock of the chariot faded, its presence continued to drive battlefield evolution. Proof that a simple wheeled frame and a pair of horses could catalyze centuries of tactical innovation. In Hittite folklore, the chariot transcended its utilitarian origins, attaining mythic proportions. Temple reliefs at Yazilikaya depict storm god Tarhunt racing across heaven in a 4-horse chariot, thunderbolts trailing behind like fiery banners. These images fuse divine authority with martial prowess, suggesting that mortal war wagons were Earth's echo of celestial battles. Bards composed epic verses celebrating legendary charioteers, figures like Tudalia the Swift and Hapuila of many arrows, whose names became shorthand for courage and cunning. These poems, recited at banquets and royal courts, painted scenes of chariots galloping through mountain passes, dragging down amphitheaters of enemy spearmen. The lines blurred between history and legend, forging a cultural memory that survived the empire's decline. Cuneiform tablets recovered centuries later record choreographed processions, reenacting these myths. Drivers wore masks of storm god faces, and horses were adorned with bells to mimic thunder. Even after the Hittite realm fractured, neighboring states preserved these stories, adopting Hittite deities and chariot iconography into their own pantheons. Through myth, the chariot secured its eternal place in the human imagination, no longer just a machine of war, but a vessel of legend, carrying echoes of gods and heroes into the depths of time. Though warfare was a predominantly male domain, noble Hittite women occasionally mounted the same war chariots that thundered across battlefields. Princess Suppiluliuma, sister of a great king, is said to have sponsored chariot brigades and even ridden into border skirmishes to rally troops. Her presence, clothed in embroidered linen and bronze armlets, lent both morale and ceremony to campaigns. In frescoes at royal palaces, we glimpse female attendants adjusting polished harness straps and offering aromatic oils to calm panicked horses before battle. Storytellers later whispered of a female charioteer whose arrow from a moving chariot saved an entire battalion from an ambush. Her name, lost to time, but her legacy preserved in lullabies sung to Hittite children. Beyond the fray, women oversaw chariot maintenance yards, supervising timber deliveries and bronze casting for spare parts. Their administrative prowess, often recorded in administrative tablets, ensured the wheels of war never ground to a halt. In their hands, the chariot became more than a war machine. It was a symbol of status, skill, and the rare moments when women joined the thunderous chorus of empire. In Hattusa's bustling quarter of artisans, craft guilds held secrets as prized as royal decrees. The Wheelwrights Guild boasted an emblem of crossed spokes, while the Metalworkers Guild brandished a tiny bronze chariot in its seal. Competition was fierce. Each guild safeguarded proprietary alloy recipes and spoke-fitting techniques under oath of silence. Monthly gatherings at the Guildhall were equal parts forum and festival, Wheelwrights demonstrated new shock-absorbing yoke designs, while metalworkers showcased hardened bronze alloys capable of resisting enemy projectiles. Apprentices whispered of midnight workshops where master craftsmen tested prototypes under torchlight, listening for telltale creaks that betrayed a weak spoke. Guild leaders held sway over royal contracts. A chariot batch commissioned by the king would elevate a guild's status for years. Tablet records reveal negotiations over tax exemptions in exchange for faster production schedules. Even as the battlefield demanded more chariots, artisans balanced speed with durability, tactile proof that empire building depended as much on skilled hands as on royal war plans. Just beyond the city's northern gate lay a broad training plain, where charioteers honed skills beneath the watchful gaze of captains and heralds. Early dawn mist still clung to the grass when recruits, linen-clad and resolute, drove chariots around wooden markers, learning to carve tight turns without spilling their comrades. Drums beat a steady cadence as veteran riders coached novices on balance and timing. Archery targets, round shields affixed to poles, tested accuracy at full gallop. Mistimed shots often clanged harmlessly against the ground, eliciting wry laughter from trainers more amused than angry. Discipline came through encouragement rather than harsh punishment. In one corner, a small amphitheatre hosted mock engagements. Scouts signaled with banners as chariot teams performed flanking maneuvers designed to exploit open flanks. Spectators, soldiers on foot, cheered and noted tactics they might emulate. By sunset, horses were led to troughs of cool water and hollowed gourds of barley mash, muscles fasting from a day's rigorous drills yet already dreaming of tomorrow's thunderous charge. Anatolia's rugged terrain tested even the sturdiest chariots. Rocky passes, narrow gorges, and sudden downpours turned wheels into liabilities. In response, Hittite engineers experimented with reinforced axles using composite bronze and wood cores, and leather-soled wheels that absorb shock like ancient suspension. Field workshops, canvas tents with portable anvils, traveled with the army. Ahead of campaigns, master engineers scoured maps to anticipate terrain hazards, pre-installing extra bracing on chassis destined for steep mountain fords. When a wheel cracked under pressure, teams of wheelwrights would replace the hub in minutes rather than hours, using pre-cut spoke sets and modular rims stamped with the royal seal for authenticity. Despite these innovations, surprises abounded. Sudden floods on dry riverbeds could flip a chariot, sending crew and horses tumbling. In those moments, the bond between charioteer and steed was tested. A deft hand could right an overturned vehicle, saving lives and the empire's precious investment. Each failure, carefully recorded on tablets, fueled the next wave of improvements, reminding all that technology's triumph depended on relentless adaptation in the face of nature's whims. Chariots were woven into Hittite worship as much as they were arrayed for war. During annual storm god festivals, temple courtyards filled with replica chariots draped in white linen and fragrant garlands. Priests led processions at dawn, the clatter of chariot wheels echoing like distant thunder, an offering to coax rainfall and divine favor. In one ceremony, a small chariot bore the statue of the sun deity Shimige, crowned with gold leaf. As incense smoke curled around its polished wheels, worshippers chanted blessings, invoking the chariot's power to traverse both earthly planes and celestial realms. Young acolytes, faces painted with lapis lazuli dust, danced before the chariot, carrying bowls of olive oil to anoint its axles, symbolically lubricating the sun's daily journey across the sky. Even defeated armies carried chariot fragments back to temple altars, dedicating them as votive offerings. Bronze fittings found in sacrificial pits at Hattusa suggest that warriors believed divine approval depended on sharing their triumphs and losses with the gods. In this sacred wheel song, technology and theology moved in harmonious procession, each revolution of the axle a prayer for prosperity and protection. Beyond the city walls of Alalak, Hittite engineers deployed chariots not just for pitched battle, but as mobile command posts. High on the chariot's platform, a signal crew of hornblowers and torchbearers coordinated the approach of battering rams and siege towers. As archers on the walls loosed volleys of arrows, chariots wove between trenches, scouting for weak spots. When scouts spotted a crumbling section of mudbrick, the chariot's conch horn blast summoned sappers to tunnel beneath, undermining walls in stealthy night raids. Under moonlight, wooden wheels squeaked across damp earth as drivers guided the platform close enough to whisper orders to infantry captains. By dawn, the chariot-led tactics had created multiple breaches, overwhelming defenders accustomed only to static assaults. In Hittite lore, this innovation became known as the Whispering Wheels, for the way chariots silently directed the ebb and flow of siege lines. With each revolution of the axle, they redrew the boundaries between defense and collapse, turning once impregnable fortresses into open gateways for advancing legions. At the plain of Neria, two titans clashed, Hittite thunder wheels against Mitanni war elephants, on either flank, chariots massed in disciplined ranks, riders gripping reins as thunderous trumpets heralded the fight. When the first elephant trumpet rent the air, Hittite archers released a hail of arrows, aiming for vulnerable eyes and mahout seats. The chariots, trained to pivot on a dime, darted between massive feet, slashing at the elephant's legs with bronze-tipped lances. Dust clouds churned as drivers executed the circle of spears, an audacious maneuver drawing elephants inward, then flicking the wheel-rubbed shafts outward in a deadly perimeter. The ground trembled beneath hoof and claw until, disoriented by spikes and flame torches affixed to chariot sides, the elephants retreated in panic. In Hittite chronicles, King Shuppiluliuma I declared it a testament to chariot agility over brute force, proof that speed and coordination could overthrow even nature's mightiest war beasts. As dawn broke, the battered Mitanni lines fractured, and history forever noted how the chariot's swift terror tamed a pachyderm army. When envoys from Babylon arrived at Hattusa, they were greeted not by foot soldiers but by a glittering chariot entourage. Painted white for peace, each chariot bore silk banners depicting olive branches entwined with lightning bolts, a nod to both diplomacy and military might. As the Babylonian ambassador Hezekiel disembarked, Hittite nobles offered him the honor of riding in a chariot parade before treaty talks began. Side by side, Ezekiel and Prince Anuwanda circled the royal courtyard, overseen by trumpeters, flourish, and torchlit braziers inlaid with lapis. Every rhythmic clatter of iron-shod wheels underscored the pact's gravity. Hittite power could protect allies or smite foes. Over shared wine in a chariot-shaped banquet pavilion, they drafted clauses guaranteeing safe passage along key trade routes. In later annals, this chariot accord was celebrated as a masterstroke of soft power, melding pageantry with purpose, and proving that sometimes a wheel's turn could bind kingdoms more tightly than any scroll. Carved into the rock sanctuary of Yazalakaya, towering reliefs immortalize the Hittite gods riding chariots drawn by winged steers. Each figure, rendered in sun-bleached sandstone, holds aloft a spear or scepter, the wheels exaggerated in size to symbolize divine motion. Nearby, scribes copied chariot tactic manuals onto clay tablets, diagrams of wheel ratios, axle stanchions, and recommended crew formations. Pilgrims visiting the sanctuary would trace the carved spokes with reverent fingers, believing that divine power flowed from stone into steel. In royal archives, cuneiform scrolls detailed not only battle maneuvers, but ethical guidelines, how a chariot warrior should treat captives, honor horses, and respect enemy courts. These texts, buried for millennia, remind us that the chariot was not merely a tool of conquest, but also a vehicle of cultural transmission, its innovations echoing in classical cavalry treatises and even modern military academies. As historians brush away centuries of dust, the whispers of ash and clay convey a legacy stronger than steel, that every revolution begins with imagination, whether in workshop smoke or carved stone. After the Battle of Carchemish, captured Hittite artisans found themselves in the court of Assyria's Ashurbanipal. Here, in sprawling royal workshops, They demonstrated how to temper bronze alloys for lighter, stronger axles and taught local wheelwrights to shape felloes into near-perfect circles. Under their guidance, Assyrian chariots gained the trademark Hittite bounce, a subtle suspension effect allowing drivers to maintain speed over rough Mesopotamian roads. Assyrian reliefs at Nineveh began to depict chariots with elongated yokes and elevated footboards, innovations directly traced to Hittite originators. Soon, Persian satraps sent envoys to Nineveh to study these vehicles, supercharging the diffusion along trade arteries. Even Indian epics, centuries later, celebrate sky wheels that recall the Hittite prototype. Proof that an Anatolian workshop's quiet revolution could ripple across continents and eras. In every axle's hum, every bronze glint at dawn, we glimpse the chariot's true legacy. Not the battles it won, but the shared ingenuity it unleashed across the ancient world. As Hittite chariots thundered across battlefields, rival kingdoms scrambled to blunt their impact. Infantry commanders introduced caltrops, iron spikes hidden beneath straw beds, to cripple wheels. They dug narrow trenches and camouflaged pitfalls along known chariot thoroughfares. Foot soldiers formed tight spear hedges, interlocking long iron-tipped pikes to halt charging wheels in their tracks. These countermeasures forced charioteers to rethink tactics, slowing charges and favoring skirmishing over direct assaults. In Mitanni camps, engineers designed collapsible palisades deployed by light infantry. When a chariot charge approached, wooden panels snapped together into low barricades, buying time for archers to pepper horses with barbed arrows. Meanwhile, Hittite tacticians adapted by mounting small shields on wheel hubs, deflecting spears and prolonging mobility. The battlefield became a chessboard of offense and defense, where each technological leap spurred a swift countermove. Ultimately, the chariot's dominance hinged on adaptability, both in ironwork and battlefield doctrine, and on the constant innovation of enemies eager to see the wheels grind to a halt. Each summer solstice, King Suppiluliuma II transformed Hattusa's Grand Plaza into a glittering showcase of Hittite might. Elaborately painted chariots, their frames inlaid with ivory and bronze rosettes, rolled past tens of thousands of cheering subjects. Trumpeters in crimson cloaks sounded fanfares as dancers twirled beneath silken banners depicting divine chariots. Eunuch heralds proclaimed the king's conquests, and emissaries from vassal states offered tribute, exotic timbers, rare gemstones, even captured war horses. At the parade's apex, the royal chariot, glimmering with gold leaf and perched on oversized wheels, carried Suppiluliuma himself. His harnessed steeds wore decorative breastplates, and a canopy of red silk fluttered above. Spectators pressed flower petals into the parade route, filling the air with sweet scents that mingled with sweat and horses' breath. In that orchestrated pageant, the chariot embodied more than military innovation. It symbolized cosmic order, divine favor, and the unbroken line of Hittite sovereignty. Under the midday sun, each bronze fitting and polished spoke shone like a promise. As long as these wheels turned, the empire would endure. Behind every gleaming chariot lay a web of commerce. Forests of oak and plane trees felled for axle wood, mines yielding copper and tin for bronze, and tanneries producing thick oxhide harnesses. The royal treasury underwritten massive subsidies. Artisans received grain rations and tax relief in exchange for alloy quotas, while state caravans transported raw materials across dusty trade routes. Local timber merchants, often kin to wheelwrights, negotiated bulk contracts, sending caravans of pack mules laden with sawn planks to Forge Town workshops. Ezili, the royal treasurer, meticulously logged each ingot of bronze dispersed for chariot fittings in a clay ledger. She calculated that a single, four-wheeled war chariot cost nearly 2 years' wages for a foot soldier. Wealthy nobles funded prototype experiments, hoping for patent-like monopolies on improved axle designs. Meanwhile, road tax collectors levied tolls on merchants transporting ore and leather. Despite these levies, demand surged whenever the king prepared for a spring campaign. Economic pressures forced smiths to innovate thinner bronze shells and adopt standardized fittings, reducing both weight and waste. In the delicate balance of state finance and engineering need, the Hittite chariot economy propelled both military power and artisanal ingenuity to new heights. In Hittite myth, chariots were not mere vehicles, but divine steeds of the gods. Temple hymns spoke of Tahant's thunderous carriage, drawn by fiery-maned horses that shook the heavens. Priestly chants described how the sun goddess's chariot, ablaze with celestial bronze, shepherded daylight across the sky. Ritual dramas reenacted these cosmic journeys. Masked actors drove miniature chariots inside temple courtyards as incense curled skyward. To the faithful, each wheel turn was a prayer for rainfall, each polished rim a testament to divine favor. In the festival of Zagmuk, priests paraded a golden chariot effigy before the storm god's statue. Villagers prostrated themselves in reverence, believing the model's passage would ensure fertile fields and victory in battle. Myths also cautioned against hubris. A tale survives of a mortal king who stole a divine chariot wheel and was consumed by lightning. These legends wove the chariot into Hittite spiritual life, so that every battlefield deployment echoed a sacred quest. Through carved reliefs, epic poems, and whispered campfire stories, the divine chariot's symbolism endured long after empires crumbled. While Hittite smiths refined bronze fittings, enemy agents crept into Anatolian workshops under cover of night. Small crews of Mitanni and Assyrian saboteurs, clad in dark cloaks, slipped past guard rotations to apply grease and weaken axle caps. A single sabotage yoke could send a chariot careening into disarray on the battlefield. To counteract this threat, the Hittites instituted sealed clay stamps on each fitting, a breakable seal that, once tampered with, betrayed would-be saboteurs. Yet cunning spies learned to forge seals and distract guards with false alarms. Field reports tell of a lone operative named the Jackal, who bribed a guard's son with fine linen in exchange for nightly access to the forge. Under flickering torchlight, he pried loose bronze components and replaced them with brittle alloys. One dawn, a test chariot's wheel shattered during training drills, nearly killing the prince's own son. The incident prompted royal edicts mandating double seal verification and undercover investigations. As much a battle of wits as of steel, the war of sabotage underscored that even the deadliest invention could be undone by a single, well-placed misstep. Though rare, the annals of Anatolia preserve luminous accounts of warrior princesses who took the reins of war chariots into battle. Among them, Princess Puduhepa of Kizuwatanar was famed for donning scale armor and leading dawn raids against border raiders. In the half-light before sunrise, she strode to her chariot, its ebony frame inlaid with ivory and its wheels trimmed in silver, her braided hair bound by a gilded fillet. Her charioteer, the veteran soldier Amanutsi, stood ready. At her command, 2 bay horses pawed the ground, nostrils flaring in the cool air. As Puduhepa mounted, the camp hushed. Male warriors bowed their heads in respect. They surged forth along dusty tracks, the princess's curved bows singing as she loosed arrows into the enemy's camp, sowing confusion. Returning before breakfast, she brought captives and vital intelligence, reshaping the political landscape without spilling royal blood. Over time, her legend inspired other noblewomen to sponsor charioteer training and donate horse herds, weaving female agency into the tapestry of Hittite military innovation. When enemy forces encircled the fortified workshop town of Samuha, Hittite engineers faced urgent demands: keep chariot production alive under siege conditions. Tents sprang up among the red-washed walls as mobile forges rolled in under canvas. Master wheelwright Uhilnuna unpacked prefabricated hubs and standardized spokes, each stamped with the royal seal for quick assembly. Bronzesmith Bequintali worked by oil lamp at a portable furnace, melting scrap metal to cast replacement yokes. The clamour of battle echoed beyond the ramparts as charioteers scouted enemy encampments. Night after night, engineers repaired shattered wheels in makeshift pits, using splints of limewood to brace cracks and binding them with leather straps dipped in pitch. When fresh timber was scarce, they improvised with salvaged cart frames. These crisis-born innovations yielded lighter chassis and interchangeable parts, speeding repairs and ensuring more chariots returned to the field. Those siege towers loomed just beyond the horizon. The ingenuity of Anatolian artisans kept the thunder of war horses alive, proving that adaptability under pressure was as vital as raw strength in determining an empire's survival. Beyond its physical capabilities, the Hittite chariot wielded a powerful psychological weapon. From the depths of the Anatolian plains came a low rumble, like distant thunder, heralding the approach of dozens of chariots in formation. Infantry from neighboring kingdoms would grip spears tighter, eyes wide as the ground trembled beneath thundering hooves. Signal drummers beat heavy skins in escalating rhythms, while trumpet calls pierced the tension like brazen proclamations of doom. During one famed encounter near the city of Ura, charioteers held their ranks at dawn's grey light. No weapons were drawn, only the unified drumbeat and synchronicity of dozens of chariots circling the city walls in perfect harmony. The defenders, convinced that reinforcements must be closing in, surrendered before a single arrow flew. Ancient scribes recorded that victory came not from bloodshed, but from the sheer aura of unstoppable force. For centuries, generals would study the Hittite example. Fear itself could be harnessed as effectively as any arrow, and the mind's alarm bells might turn tide without a single clash of steel. In the late 12th century BCE, the grand Bronze Age tapestry began its unravelling. Seismic shifts, climate stresses, internal revolts, and marauding sea peoples left Hittite cities burned and chariot stables abandoned. At Ugarit's ruins, archaeologists would later uncover scattered wheel hubs and splintered spokes amid collapsed palaces. In 1180 BCE, the once proud stables of Hattusa fell silent. Horses roamed free through hushed courtyards where craftsmen's tools lay rusting. Yet even in collapse, the chariot left an echo. Small mountain clans salvaged iron from broken bronze fittings, forging crude carts that followed ancient routes. Agricultural communities repurposed leather harnesses to pull plows rather than war machines. Though the thunder of chariot charges faded, the technology's fingerprints endured, woven into the fabric of successor states from Phrygia to Urartu. The Bronze Age empires may have crumbled, but their wheeled war vehicles had sown seeds of change that survived the flames. Though the Hittite Empire dissolved into history's dust, military thinkers would study its chariot innovations for millennia. Iron Age generals in Assyria cited cuneiform manuals on flanking maneuvers. Egyptian strategists examined hub reinforcement techniques to bolster their own war carts. By the classical era, Greek hoplite commanders distinguished between infantry and thunder-wheeled crafts in their treatises, acknowledging Hittite foresight. Medieval Byzantines unearthed fragments of Hittite fitting designs, adapting them to their light scouts' carriages. In Renaissance workshops, Savonarola's wheelwrights referenced Anatolian axle bracing for sturdier carriage wheels. Even today, historians and engineers collaborate in experimental archaeology to test reconstructed Hittite chariots, validating ancient accounts of speed, maneuverability, and psychological impact. These ongoing studies underscore a timeless truth. Innovation thrives at the intersection of necessity and creativity. As you reflect on the Hittite chariot's enduring echo, from clay tablets to VR simulations, remember that every technological leap reshapes societies and warfare alike. The wheel, one of humanity's simplest inventions, proved devastating when paired with bronze and horsepower. Its story reminds us that progress carries both promise and peril, and that the echoes of ancient ingenuity still guide our modern world. In the early 20th century, under Anatolia's heat-blanched skies, trench by trench, archaeologists unveiled the lost capital of Tocha. Amid shattered columns and collapsed walls lay fragments of crates stamped with royal insignia. Then, one morning, A battered wheel rim emerged from the red clay, a silent testament to the war machines of yesteryear. Teams in pith helmets and linen field gear meticulously sorted chariot parts, axle guards, bronze fittings, and leather harness buckles. Each discovery prompted mass excitement. A metal detector's faint beep led to a near-intact chariot wheel, buried beneath layers of temple debris. In makeshift labs, conservators brushed away centuries of dust, revealing tool marks that matched descriptions in Hittite edicts. These breakthroughs transformed our understanding. No longer mere myth, the chariot rose again as a tangible artifact. Lessons once confined to fragmentary texts now bore physical weight. As twilight shadows stretched across dig sites, archaeologists paused to imagine the thunderous charge these relics once realized. Their careful unearthing rekindled the saga of bronze and wood, bringing ancient warhorses back to life in museum halls and research papers. In a windswept Anatolian field, living historians and engineers team up to breathe life into Hittite chariots. With recreated ashwood frames and replica bronze fittings, they aim to test speed, maneuverability, and rider endurance. Cameras roll as a replica chariot thunders across the plain, its two-horse team spitting dirt in rhythmic gallop. Data loggers strapped to the driver's chest record heart rate and G-forces. Arrows tipped with sensors fly from the archer's bow to measure accuracy under motion. Each sprint exposes new insights: the optimal spoke angle for shock absorption, the leather strap tension for stability, and the precise foot placements that keep the charioteer balanced. Between runs, participants debate aloud over cups of sweetened pomegranate tea, comparing ancient treatises with modern telemetry charts. By dusk, they tally results on a whiteboard, top speed recorded at 10 miles per hour, safe turning radius measured in wheel diameters, ideal arrow release window identified. These experiments bridge millennia, reminding us that hands-on trial remains the best teacher. As the sun dips below distant hills, the team packs up, leaving wheel ruts that mark a living conversation between past and present. From silent-era epics to glossy Netflix documentaries, the Hittite Chariot has buckled onto the silver screen time and again. Early filmmakers, armed with sweeping desert backdrops and dozens of horses, staged grand chariot charges that thrilled audiences but often sacrificed historical nuance. In one 1920s epic, bronze wheels were painted gold, more for cinematic sparkle than archaeological accuracy. Today, documentary makers strive to balance spectacle with scholarship. Drone shots hover above recreated battlefields, while historians in voiceover correct every anachronistic stirrup and oversized hub. Even animated kids' shows weave in chariot facts, depicting scale mail armor and bow drivers with surprising fidelity. Cosplay enthusiasts attend conventions wearing leather harnesses and miniature chariot models, eager to reenact the thunderous thrill in steampunk or fantasy settings. Through each adaptation, the chariot remains a cinematic shorthand for speed, power, and ancient intrigue. Its curved silhouette and dual horses tap into a collective fascination with the roots of mechanized warfare. As you drift into sleep, consider how these on-screen echoes shape our image of the past. Sometimes accurate, sometimes fanciful, but always inviting us to peer into history's dusty corridors. Over centuries, the chariot's thunderous rush inspired more than battlefield memoirs. It spurred metaphors that still vex poets and preachers today. Latin writers spoke of currus fortunae, the chariot of fortune, turning unpredictably to bestow favor or calamity. Sufi poets likened the soul's ascent to divine realms as a chariot ride beyond mortal sorrows. In medieval Europe, troubadours sang of love's chariot, drawn by passion's fiery steeds. Each idiom borrowed the chariot's essence: swift motion, dramatic entrance, and the tension between control and abandon. Chariots of fire entered hymnals, carrying souls toward light. Pilgrims painted chariots on votive tablets, hoping to hitch their prayers to celestial journeys. Even modern screenwriters reference Chariot of Steel, the tank, continuing the metaphor in new mechanical guises. These linguistic echoes remind us that technology seeps into our imagination long after its wheels cease turning. Tonight, let the phrase Chariot of Dreams guide you. May it ferry your thoughts through restorative slumber, free from earthly cares. Tread lightly along the weathered stone roads of ancient Hattusa, and you'll find wheel ruts etched into limestone, fossilized traces of Hittite chariots. Modern pilgrims wear sun hats and carry water bottles, but move in hushed reverence. They pause where a wheel once caught on a protruding rock, or where a scribe memorably carved a tally of chariot losses after a hard campaign. Archaeological signage points to collapsed temples and royal stables, yet the landscape feels open, almost empty, save for the soft whispering of wind through tufts of grass. Visitors sit on broken column drums, closing their eyes to imagine horses snorting and iron-tipped wheels sparking on stone. Local guides recount myths of storm gods racing across the sky in bronze chariots, blending legend with the stark archaeology underfoot. As dusk washes rose-tinted light over crumbling gateways, the hush deepens. You may catch the listening echo of hooves if you stand very still, or sense the distant clinking clink of bronze. When you depart, carry these silent impressions into your dreams, a living bridge between past and present, guided by the faint, enduring, whispering whisper of chariot wheels. Long after Hattusa's gates fell silent, the legacy of the Hittite chariot endured in workshops across medieval Europe. Wheelwrights studying Byzantine war carts marveled at the Hittite innovation, spoked wheels that balanced lightness with strength. In Renaissance Italy, master carriage builders pored over schematic scrolls, copies of earlier clay diagrams, evolving axle greasing techniques and bronze bushings. The echo of those Bronze Age designs resonated in the smooth glide of gala processional carriages and the sturdy war wagons that thundered across 14th century battlefields. By the 17th century, engineers experimenting with early steam-powered transport noted the efficiency of a spoked wheel chassis. Even as technology leapt into iron and steel, the fundamental principle, minimizing weight while maximizing load-bearing capacity, remained rooted in those Anatolian workshops. In quiet guild halls, dusty tomes referenced the ancient king's wheel, a shorthand for chariot wisdom handed down over 2 millennia. From the ornate gondolas of Venice to the military wagons of the 30 Years' War, the spirit of the Hittite craftsman lived on. Wood shaped by fire, metal alloyed by art, and wheels that carried the ambitions of empires into new eras. In a sunlit lab at a modern university, the faint of a VR headset marks the latest chapter in the chariot's journey. Historians and game designers joined forces to recreate an ancient Hittite battlefield. Rolling plains dotted with scrub oak, textured chariot models accurate to the millimeter, and the distant clamor of war horns synthesized through surround sound. Users strap on motion tracking vests, gripping USB-connected reins that simulate the tug of bristling Anatolian horses. As the virtual wheels pick up speed, the rush of wind and the rhythmic thud of hooves send shivers of adrenaline through the participant. This isn't mere entertainment. Researchers gather biomechanical data, how much force a charioteer exerts on the reins, muscle strain in loosed arrows mid-gallop, and reaction times under simulated enemy volleys. Archaeometallurgists adjust the virtual alloy composition to test fracture points. With each code tweak, the VR model approaches a living time machine, inviting new generations to feel the power and peril of Bronze Age innovation. Its history embodied, where dusty texts and silent relics transform into an immersive dance of light and sound. And one can almost taste the grit on their tongue as they hurtle toward destiny. Fast forward to the blitzkrieg of the 20th century. Armored divisions charging like steel-clad chariots across European plains. Military theorists drew parallels between the Hittite shock tactics and the mechanized spearheads of World War II. Just as charioteers exploited speed and surprise against static infantry, tank commanders carved wedges through enemy lines. At NATO war colleges, cadets studied chariot battle drills alongside armored warfare manuals, tracing a lineage from ashwood spokes to caterpillar tracks. Yet the lessons extended beyond hardware. Communication, once signaled by bronze trumpets, evolved into radio nets. Coordination of a two-man chariot crew foreshadowed modern combined arms doctrine. Infantry, armor, and air support working in concert. Even today's rapid deployment forces owe a conceptual debt to those early innovations. Mobility as force multiplier, psychological shock as strategic tool. It's a testament to the enduring wisdom of ancient ingenuity, that when humans harness technology to amplify speed, coordination, and morale, the battlefield itself becomes a malleable stage for daring ideas.
Among the clay tablets unearthed at Hattusa lies a charioteer's prayer scratched in cuneiform, a humble plea for safe passage and swift steeds. We imagine Tarku, a young recruit with calloused hands and a heart pounding with both pride and dread. Each dawn, he would braid his horse's mane with coloured wool for strength, whispering blessings meant to ward off arrow fire. His days blurred into a rhythm of supervision by his commander, carving his own initials into spare bronze spokes, both a mark of ownership and a talisman against misfortune. By moonlight, Tarku kept a brittle reed ink journal inside his linen satchel. My heart leaps as wheels spin beneath me. The wind sings through the straps. May this chariot carry me home alive. His bond with his horse, Larissa, was sacred. When Tarku fainted under fever, Larissa nudged him awake, breaking camp's silence. Now, centuries later, we piece together these fragments, his journal's torn edges, hoofprints pressed in hardened mud, to glimpse the human soul behind the thunderous spectacle. Through his eyes, the chariot is not just war machine but companion, refuge, and conduit of aspiration. As twilight settles over Anatolia, the silhouette of a lone chariot wheel stands against the fading sky, an echo of innovation that once decided the fate of empires. Today, that whisper of wood and bronze endures in museum displays, virtual reconstructions, and the lexicon of military strategy. The thunder of hooves has quieted into pages of textbooks and digital simulations, yet the essence remains. Human ingenuity harnessed to motion, to power, to change. In this final chapter, we reflect on how a single technological leap rippled through time, reshaping battlefield tactics, informing engineering marvels, and capturing the human imagination. That ancient wheel taught us to value mobility and surprise, to refine material science, and to tell stories that bridge millennia. When we trace its spoke pattern, we follow the arc of human curiosity, the drive to build, to adapt, and to leave a legacy. So, as you drift into sleep, let the chariot's whisper guide your dreams. A soft creak of axle, the ghost echo of a distant charge, and the promise that even the smallest invention can spin the world anew.